Welcome back, listeners, to a brand new episode of The New Standard. And you're checking out the program on Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. As always, the show is hosted by yours truly, Lance Williams. I want to welcome everybody to the program. Please like and subscribe to the program. Before we jump into it, I want to give a big shout out to Coach Hatcher because some of the content on this program is going to be based on some of his observations and his notes. And Coach Hatcher is an offensive line coach at one of the best high school programs in the state of California. And he was kind enough to share his thoughts and comments about several players on the offensive line. So I want to thank him for his contributions to the program. Also, if you want to listen to the show via podcast, make sure you go to however you get your podcasts and do a search for The New Standard and Steelers. Big up to everybody out there for supporting and listening to the program. Let's jump right into it. The title of the program is If We're Gonna Box, We Gotta Spar. Simple enough. And this is what preseason is for. If you want to learn how to box and exercise and do your craft correctly, you gotta spar. This is a quote from Mike Tomlin. He's absolutely right. This is the reason that there is a preseason and why guys lift all them weights is because if you're gonna box, you gotta spar. And I thought the boxing was a little uneven in the first game. And specifically, I want to jump into the offensive line because a lot of things that I was talking about in the first show dealt with me wanting to look at the offensive line and give my thoughts and perspective because I think it's a unit that's in flux. A lot of young guys, a lot of turnover, and a lot of assets and draft capital put into the line. So I just want to give my thoughts on, or I want to share the thoughts of Coach Hatcher on the offensive line. Let's start with first round draft pick out of Washington, Troy Fautanu. And this is what he wrote about Troy Fautanu. And there's been some breaking news from Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette about Fautanu starting the first game of the year against Atlanta, coming out to be the starting right tackle. And this is what Coach Hatch had to say about Big T, Big Troy. Explosive movement skills, physical downfield blocker, moves well in space. He will need to adjust to speed and strength of NFL edge rushers, but he will get there, in my opinion, way too athletic to not be a plus pass protector. I agree with a lot of what he said. Here's what I will say. If they're making Big Troy the starter week one, he better had practiced better than he played in the preseason game. I mean, the guy got beat for 2 sacks, multiple pressures. On top of that, wasn't the outing that you would think, would lead to him potentially starting. Because, Mike Tomlin always talks about showing up in stadiums. I'm not sure Big T, his stat line warrants a start. But of course, they've seen him more than we have, and they've seen him against the likes of TJ Watt and others. And so they must be convinced if Dulac's report is correct. But I think I'm calling cap on Dulac. I think I'm calling cap on Dulac because who told Dulac? I mean, do you think the offensive line coach called Dulac and said, yo, Jerry, dog, let me hit you with the info, baby. Big T is going to start at right tackle. Also, it doesn't make sense given his MCL sprain in the game. He's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. I mean, I'd be surprised if he's done enough in training camp to warrant being the starter. That just doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense, especially how they brought Broderick Jones along last year. It just doesn't make sense that they rushed the kid out, particularly after an MCL, not being able to practice over the next several weeks and throw him into the fire in week one. I mean, Jerry's been doing it a long time. I haven't, obviously. Jerry's getting paid to do it. And, so for now, we're going to take Jerry's word for it. And Big T is going to be the starter week one. I'm calling cap on it, but we'll see. Again, listeners, you're checking out the program. If we're going to box, we got to spar. Let me jump into the next breakdown from Coach Hatch. Broderick Jones, dominant run blocker, physical downfield blocker, moves well in space. I'm not sure he will ever be a great pass blocker, but should get better as he gains experience. I would absolutely agree. I think he's very raw still, but I think his physical traits and characteristics are outstanding. His size, his physical dimensions, his speed. I mean, hell, when you watch him when you watch Broderick Jones, I mean, if you're looking very quickly at the screen, I mean, you think he's a tight end. I mean, the movement skills are ridiculous. What they have him doing, pulling and getting to the edge from as a tackle to the opposite edge towards the boundary is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, his athletic ability definitely is of first round caliber. I think with him, with consistent coaching, like Coach Hatch said, as he drills down into these details, he could be a dominant player. I think the guy that I was most excited about, though, as we skipped the notes on Dan Moore, and Coach Hatch said Dan Moore, great run blocker, moves very well, not as bad as many think. He just has a tendency to overstep and get beat by speed. One thing I'll say about that is, why does he still have that tendency? That's the issue. That's the issue with Dan Moore. He still has the tendency. Nate Herbig notes, Coach Hatch said, average pass pro, but solid in the run game. One thing he has to clean up is the exchange. You can't have that as a veteran player. You can't have that problem of fumbling the football on multiple snaps. And again, like we said on the last program, it doesn't matter whose fault it was. It doesn't matter if you think it's Herbig's fault, Sheebig, or you think it was Justin Fields' fault. The result is the same. Got to get that cleaned up. And two veterans can't have that type of play, particularly when, if you're going to box, you got to spar. And you got to move your head when you spar. And part of that is a clean exchange. In terms of James Daniel, Coach Hatch said, above average run blocker and pass blocker. It's kind of hard to believe they aren't trying to lock him up as a Steelers long term. And I'm going to answer that for you, Coach Hatch, as well as anybody listening. You're checking out the new standard. If we're going to box, we got to spar. And the reason they're not trying to lock him up is because of the next player that Coach gave a quick scout on, and that's Mason McCormick. You already saw his ability to climb to the second level, his aggressiveness, his strength, being able to anchor, his movement skills, his athleticism. They're probably not going to extend James Daniel because of Mason McCormick. I mean, when you draft two interior offensive linemen, I mean, the writing's on the wall for somebody. There's not enough offensive line spots. They're not going to keep like 12 guys on the offensive line. So, I mean, it's a numbers game. I think James Daniel has been very solid. However, I think Mason McCormick is the future guard. I think James Daniel will be the starter this year. I mean, you got to have a veteran presence. And if you're going to start a young player, and we're going to talk about him in Zach Frazier, if you're going to put a young player as your center, you have to have some stability and some veterans to either side of him on the interior in terms of the guards. You got to have some veteran guards next to him to help him call out protections and to just help him acclimate himself to the game and get prepared and get ready. I mean, it's a lot to put on a brand new center. I mean, you got to be Marquise Pouncey like, but it's a lot to put on a brand new center without having some vets that he can lean on in the interior at the guard positions. And I think the Steelers will do that. I mean, Siamalu and Daniel will be the starters next season. But the guy I was most excited about was Zach Frazier. And let me read the comments from Coach on Zach Frazier. In a small sample size, looks like the future at the center position. He appears to be truly nasty in the run game, especially getting to the second level. I think he will eventually be named the starter either by week 1 or shortly after. Now, the approach that the Steelers are taking with Fautanu and with Frazier is interesting. Now, of course, we're not seeing how they practice. Frazier played, in my opinion, much better than Big T in the game. I think, a blind man could see some of the things that he brings to the table. Either he's not practicing well or Herbig is killing it in practice. But it's weird that the first rounder, and maybe, because of pedigree, that's why. And maybe also because there's no production. The pedigree and pay are one and the same, and we always use the 3 Ps to kind of decide what roster decisions will be. Again, you're checking out the new standard. Please like and subscribe to the program. If we're gonna box, we got a spar. And so maybe something is up here. I'm calling Cap again on Dulac, but something's up. But I think of the offensive line, I think the hidden gem of the group might be Spencer Anderson. And this is what Coach wrote. Looks like a very good reserve and versatile lineman. I believe he will be the swing interior lineman that can play all 3 interior positions. He appears to be solid in both run and pass and wouldn't be a liability in that role. I absolutely agree. Plus, I like his physical traits. Plus, I like the way he moved and the way they utilized him in the pulling game. I think they found one there. This offensive line, I think, has the makings of a unit that will be good in time. Not sure if you'll see all that year 1, but I could guarantee you they will be appreciably better later in the season. And I think those three guys, Jones, Big T, 4 guys, Frazier and McCormick, that will be 4 of your guys on that offensive line with Siamalu. I think that is where the offensive line is going. And, it's better. It's best to get that started. Get that foundation started. But before we get out of here, and I want to jump into some of the things that I'm looking for in game 2. And I believe they played the Detroit Lions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they played the Detroit Lions in their second preseason game. Here are some of the things I'm looking for in game number 2. And here's the first thing. I want to see Russell Wilson. Like, flat out. Like, I want to see Russell Wilson. Like, I'm tired of he's QB1, but his calf hurts. Like, look, it's time to see Russ play. Russ was 26-8 last year, but those are raw numbers. Don't get trapped and caught up in those numbers. If you watch Russ and you watch him play and you watch Russ's film, he left a lot on the field, a lot to be desired. I was absolutely shocked after watching Russ's film from last year that he actually was 26-8, because it was really hard to remember the touchdown passes that he had. in between the inconsistent play. It's time, if he's going to be QB1, it's time for that to start. It's time for him to play some football. Now, they know better than me, obviously. It's time for the nation to see Russ. That's number one. Number two, I want to see some clean offensive play. No more turnovers or no almost turnovers. I want to see some third downs get converted, and I want to see a touchdown play or two. I want to see some explosion in the passing game. So I want to see offensive cohesion. Um, Looks like he's not going to play, but the thing I was going to also say that I want to see is I want to see better pass pro from Big T, but I'll replace Big T's name with Broderick Jones. I want to see better pass pro. You can't get your quarterback hit on the screen. You just can't have it. So I want to see him look a little bit better in pass protection, clean up some of that technique. Again, I want to see Frazier. I want to see more of Frazier. I want to see if he takes a step forward and wrestles that starting center position from Nick Herbig. And I want to see the nickel. I want to see who's going to emerge as the nickel corner for the Steelers. I want to see guys in coverage. I want to see some more of Dante Jackson. And last but not least, I want to see Van Jefferson get spammed in a game. I want to see after this second preseason game that they have come to the conclusion as to, who's going to be their number two wide receiver. Is it going to be Freiermuth? Is it going to be Van Johnson? Who's going to get the wealth of targets as that number two guy? And I still have a question of APB out for George Pickens. I don't know if, in my mind, I'm convinced that George Pickens is a number one guy, a spammable target, 9, 10, 12, 11 target guy. Physical characteristics out of this world. Can he be consistent enough to be a guy that serves as the engine to the passing game? Maybe not. Maybe that's Freiermuth. Maybe Freiermuth gets 11, 10 targets a game. I don't know, but they need to find out who's going to be the passing game engine. Who's going to drive that thing? Is it going to be Pickens? Is it going to be Freiermuth? And so it'd be nice to see that start to define itself in the next preseason game, because with 3 preseason games, you're not going to see anybody, I don't think. Interesting. We'll see. I don't think you'll see starters play significant time in the 3rd preseason game. So again, if you're going to box, you got to spar. This is sparring, and the Steelers are getting in shape. But again, with me saying that, that's why I'm absolutely confused about Troy Fautanu, how he could be named the starter, because there ain't enough sparring. I mean, you got to spar. You got to get under the lights. You got to spar. We want to see some more sparring. Maybe they have seen enough to be able to make that decision. But I'm going to wait on that one. That's going to be very interesting. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. And again, thank you, Coach Hatch, for all the great notes. Go Steelers.